Here folks, I'm going to be discussing PhD funding. So starting off with self-funded PhDs. If you're a self-funded PhD student, the typical way of getting that initial funding is through a doctoral loan. A doctoral loan is a loan off the government up to generally around 25k. That 25k has to be spread across the duration of your studies because it covers your tuition expenses, any other book or consumable expense budget, and it also covers your living expense. Now, that is for the duration of your PhD. It's not refreshed year on year. So that amount that you take in that loan has got to be budgeted to stretch across the duration of your doctorate. If you are on a self-funded route though, you can elect to part-time study or full-time study on agreement with your institution, and you can supplement your cost of living with different earnings that you can take by working part-time or full-time depending on your situation. If you're a funded PhD student, you'll be paid on something called a stipend. Now, a stipend is a grant that is paid very similar to a salary that comes into your bank account, and when it comes into your bank account like a salary, it's not treated to the same tax effects as a traditional salary. So national insurance contributions are not taken out of it, no income tax, and you are not paying your student loans back. Now, this is really important distinctions to make because as a result of that does cover your living expense. Now, depending on your institution, they may have an agreement with you to put a certain amount of that towards your tuition fees. That might be taken out of your stipend, or it might be paid for by the institution and already agreed between the two of you. Now, with a stipend, there are some things to consider. Whilst it is tax-free, that does give you the opportunity to earn a part-time wage, potentially, up to the tax-free allowance or over the tax-free allowance. And that is very important if you're trying to supplement your income, because effectively what you can do is the stipend does not count towards any form of taxable wage or taxable income. So you have your earnings start with your part-time job or your other form of income. And bear in mind, most UK research institutions, the general average is around 18k for what your doctoral funding or your stipend funding looks like. But the thing to consider with this is if you're going a funded PhD route, the stipend, because it's not a traditional form of income, does not have the same effects in terms of loans and other financial agreements or programs that you might use traditionally if you've been in work and you've already got your mortgage or you've got other forms of finance. A stipend will not often be able to be weighted against that because it's not a salary. Although it's very similar, it's very distinctly different, and because of that, you do have to take that into account when applying for forms of finance outside of academia. Now, with that in mind, I also want to go through the other elements of funding that you might come across in academia. So, as an academic, you will often go along to conferences, and you can have, in some cases, a consumables budget, which as a PhD student is a pot of money that you can effectively use to go to different conferences and events. It can also pay for some of your consumables, so seats in, to get that reimbursement and to get that financial support, financial help back. Otherwise, you may potentially miss out on that consumable budget. The other thing to bear in mind is if you're going to academic events, you can apply as an early stage career researcher to be able to get some funding from these organising bodies. They will often have a pot of money that will help support early career researchers to be able to attend conferences. Some also will have budgets to support the students who are going to present an abstract. If you speak, you will often get some further support for that. And the main thing to remember with this is to give you the opportunity to attend those conferences and to really network with other members of the academic community. thing to bear in mind when you're going to these academic conferences, such as books or some small equipment. The thing to bear in mind is that will be an amount that's normally agreed with your faculty, and it's something that you have to process similar to an expense. For those who are not familiar with expenses, that is normally you have to go through your faculty providers. They will have recommended suppliers of equipment as an example, and that will be where they purchase them through as a first point of call. If you're going for a conference, they will ask you to get receipts for hotels, for travel expenses, and for the conference costs, and that is the amount that you will be reimbursed for. So that will be an initial outlay, and then the consumable budget will generally reimburse that, and that generally will follow the academic year, so September to July as an example. That's very important to remember because you need to make sure you get those effective receipts. Is try to speak to as many people as you can and really gain from their experiences. If you're in your first year and just starting out, or you're just about to apply, speak to other people in your team or in adjacent faculties to find out what conferences are interesting to go to, what some good speakers are that relate to your research and your research interests, and make sure that you're attending these events to potentially, first of all, listen and to take in the knowledge of your peers and seniors, but also potentially use it as an opportunity to get your start into academia. Present a poster as an early start where you present an element of your work where you can share that with the academic community. So as well as your academic conferences, it's the other benefits for some of these institutions might be to further support research projects. This is not something that you would generally do as a PhD student. They're often supplementary in terms of it would be something that you pursue as a postdoc or in your late explore these different conferences, engage with other scientists and professionally link with these organisations. That is really what sets the PhDs apart from masters and undergraduate study. Now you can go to these events as an undergraduate or a master's student, and I would encourage you to do so, but often these are explored by postgrads and postdocs who are still at their very early stage but wanting to get that bit of career insight into their academic journey and professional trajectory, looking at ways to fund and supplement their research, looking at people who they might want to collaborate on papers with or might want to share different research that they've piloted in similar areas of study. So this is something to bear in mind, and also do remember that you can do cross-discipline research. A lot of the times it's often very siloed in potentially area of research that you're studying. You can collaborate with other scientists, and early on this is not necessarily very clear to you, but you can work across other disciplines and other faculties, and importantly, as you're getting that early career research in, try to get as much further qualification and further understanding as you can, because although your PhD is this big overarching qualification and project, there are other areas that you can supplement this with, and a lot of doctoral training programs, whether you are self-funded or fully funded, are fantastic resources that I would encourage you to take advantage of, because they are the things that are going to help catapult your career into the next stage, whether you go into academia or into industry. And if there's any questions, please do comment below.